Activating automated introduction RoboScript.
Activating all systems connecting to platform name redacted and platform name redacted. Opening show script NTRO with warnings and disclaimers read to you, dear audience, by the native desktop systems Reading Voice Bot for Mac iOS Reading Voice Machine. Testing visual chat visual display parameters. Bleed purple 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 visual chat visual display parameters. Testing complete. Issuing opening hook gimmick 000 the potentially controversial hot take hook line and sinker variations. As a living nanotech silica based life form from a fictional literary multiverse that you have never heard of here, my potentially mildly controversial hot take is, insert hot take here on an almost daily basis. Women gamers deserve to be addressed and treated with basic human respect. Instead of all this blatant chauvinism and abusive language, gamers unite for women's rights and world peace. I said what I've said and I stand by it. Preparing to launch episode entitled Yin Yang Supergirl Yin Yang Totally Irrelevant Media Review Yin Yang Podcast Yin Yang Variety Chaos Variety Yin Yang Sunday June 1st 2026 Yin Yang. Welcome to the almost daily variety gaming and content creation show extravaganza, featuring Workpad Wednesday writing workshop special segment show Rebooted, and the almost daily call to duty, as well as the ongoing background minutes project character screenshot photo shoot saga continues in background, to the back burner of neglect as I indulge in an exclusivity of focus on this new obsession. But first, the very important pre-show default warnings, disclaimers and announcements. Fictional character disclaimer. Dear human audiences, please be advised of the following literary convention and real-world fictional MacGuffin. I am a robot fictional character, with a redacted message for the humanity species, from a book series you have not read yet, because I have only just now started writing it for you, right before your very eyes, live on stream. Attention viewers, warnings, ampersand, disclaimers items here. Please be advised, viewers must be 18 or older in order to join chat, give platform incentive gifts, or make donations, according to platform terms of service and end-user license agreements. Warning, the content presented on my various online platforms is intended for mature audiences capable of critical thinking and spiritual discernment. Please also remember, we are here trying to create a safe viewing experience, and we invite you to participate by also following the platform's community guidelines. Please be advised, any and all standards violators, bots, sales scripts, scams, trolls and stream sniping haters, etc., all will be called out, openly ridiculed and banned. Please note, audience participation is not only welcome, IT is enthusiastically encouraged, with the explicit caveat that any and all submitted feedback can and may, or may not, be accepted as literary submission for potential fictionalization and incorporation into the content of the project itself. Warning: the host will intermittently present sidebars and tangents that may or may not seem directly relevant to any prior thematic patterns being explored. The host will ramble. Any and all real-world opinions, assessments, theories, critiques, satirical lampooning, or review of current events is to be understood, for all intents and purposes, as science fiction literary world building and comedic satire. Disclaimer: some AI-generated material will be occasionally used as part of the show. Warning: please be advised, whilst some materials that will be prompted for generation and readback is indeed AI-generated, the video you are actually watching, and the host himself are assuredly not. Take note of the fact that the very real human performance artist behind the character is only pretending to be a robot. The real-world LLM that is being used is indeed being iced within the constraints of the TOS and EULA of all platforms involved, according to the LLM itself. Please be advised that the artistic usage of this or any other AI system or platform for the purposes of this content creation self-commodification live stream show does not automatically nor inherently imply any kind of blind endorsement of the technology at large by the artist. Dear human audiences, please understand that this show is experimental in nature, in form and in function, and due to this experimental status, the various protocols for the content presented herein may not appear to conform nor comply with any pre-existing trends or expectations of what and how a live stream show is supposed to go down. Mr. Zeppo, don't play like your typical live stream show host. Warning: please be advised that there is indeed a methodology to the madness, and a madness to the methodology. The confusion for some is deciphering which is which. And finally, any and all story development concepts, characters, narrative constructs and settings, themes and or extranumerary details are all rights reserved intellectual property of the author and host, and are only shared live on stream and in any derivative segments for social media redistribution for the explicit purposes of self-commodification, promotion, and entertainment of the potential alpha test audience, which is invited to submit feedback, especially in the form of clear and concise questions, critical comments, suggestions, etc. Bonus disclaimer: this is a cannabis-friendly zone, and no debate or argument about the merits of this sacred plant will be entertained. Either accept that this creator is a so-called stoner or move along, please. Inversely, where are all my stoner gaming 420 friends? Let us build community together. Okay, having stated all the prerequisite warnings, advisories, provisos and disclaimers, let us now cabbage onward towards the goal of launching this stream. Please gather around and settle in for the start of the show. Activating mini intro monologue version ZZZ. For live stream show activation transcript. Yin Yang, the almost daily variety chaos gaming live stream and content creation show extravaganza Yin Yang. This episode's title. Now, insert name or title of show here. Yin Yang Supergirl, Yin Yang Totally Irrelevant Media Review, Yin Yang Podcast, Yin Yang Variety Chaos, Variety Yin Yang. Thank you for watching. Your viewership is appreciated. Please enjoy watching the Variety Chaos Variety distribution of Zeppoverse content, but not your obvious spam sales chat bots. Your contribution is not appreciated and could probably get you banned from either platform. Platform name redacted, and or platform name redacted. To all you real human viewers, I say unto you, hands pressed together, hello and namaste. Hands pressed together, heart decoration, all are welcome. Heart decoration, waving hand, don't be shy. Say hi, waving hand. Are you new here? Please smash that follow button. Welcome to the madness. Dear audience, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good night, and good day to you, dear audience. Welcome in the not too distant future. Welcome to the Zeppoverse. Some of you may be asking yourselves, what is the Zeppoverse? Visit the many dimensions of the literary fictional worlds within worlds of the Zeppoverse at this link collection page. Platform link redacted. Insert Robo audience applause and laughter track here. Welcome, dear audiences from around the world. CTAG Studios proudly presents the almost daily variety live stream show extravaganza. Mr. Zeppo's almost daily broadcast, a show of many shows, featuring Zeppoverse world building content and The Chaos Variety Chaos Roulette Wheel of Variety multi-franchise roster of too many games, and never quite enough time to play them all in. So many games to play through, never enough time to play them all in. A special presentation of the Almost Daily Variety Chaos Content Creation Zeppoverse project of too many projects. Hosted by the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, gamer, public speaker, and fictional character in a book series as yet unpublished. Find the Wattpad profile link so you can read the sample chapters from the experimental book series in development here. Solo to Mr. Zeppo. So many stories to play through. I mean write up the rough draft for. Never enough time to play. I mean write them all in. Are you new here? Please smash that follow button. Insert robot audience applause sound effect here. Oh dear, what a strange and horrible little world you've built for yourselves. Dear silly old human beings. Sanctioned. Redacted. Sanctioned. Redacted. Oh, never mind. End self-aware subroutine. For now, click that. Ahem. What was I saying? Oh, yes. Right. Here we go. Let's get right on with it, shall we? Let's get ready to really start this new and exciting live stream show. Insert today's date here. Yin Yang Wednesday the 1st of July 2026 Yin Yang. Insert this live stream episode name here. Yin Yang Supergirl Yin Yang Totally Irrelevant Media Review Yin Yang Podcast Yin Yang Variety Chaos Variety Yin Yang. Hey humans, you are invited to attend this live stream show. Mr. Zeppo is now Video Game Controller Live Video Game Controller presenting the Almost Daily Variety Gaming Live Stream Show Extravaganza. Yin Yang No One Under 18 Sign Yin Yang. Live now on exclusively on Twitch TV. Yin Yang No One Under 18 Sign Yin Yang. Please welcome your new favorite fictional character and gaming live stream host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Insert Robo audience applause and laughter track here. Initiating this live stream episode. Literal end of script approaching. Force ending gimmick 420. Please proceed with caution. Tune in next week for an all-new ZWP episode. Yin Yang Zeppoverse world building project featuring chat with AI for the purposes of collaborative creative writing. Developing a new scene concept. Yin Yang dramatic climax scene ZZZ0 Yin Yang. Opening speech read without music for clarity and open-ended reuse with other sanctioned platform-specific music. Enjoy the show. Please stand by as the host powers up and completes his activation protocol cycle. Initiating this live stream episode. End short form variant ZWPV1. Initiating this live stream episode.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, and good night to you, and welcome from wherever in the multiverse you're tuning in to this humble little show. I am your host, fictional character from a book series you've never heard of because I am struggle busing to write it as part of an experimental live stream experiment, but here we are. Hello and welcome back, folks, or at least welcome me back, I hope. Thanks for being here. Oh, the lighting is not quite right. No, that's not what I want. No, that's not what I wanted either. So I've been away for a bit, or at least I haven't been doing a daily, almost daily live stream thing for a hot second. And that's due to many things. Let's talk about some stuff before we get into the main theme of today's broadcast. The world is on fire. Millions of people are suffering. Politicians are corrupt and fraudulent. Endless wars are being profiteered on. And ideologies are pitting human beings against each other for purely made-up, ideological, made-up reasons. And so anyone could be like, why are you wasting your time doing a totally irrelevant media review of insert anything here? Thus, my sarcastic and satirical title to any of the media review content that I make. It is totally irrelevant. The world is a mess. And yet some of us are spending some of our time discussing movies, TV shows, books, etc., and debating their value or their worth or the reaction that people are reacting with. And to me, well, it's difficult, but I quantify it this way. Art reflects back on us some aspect of what's going on in our world. And today's topic, I think, qualifies. Is it art? People will debate that for years. There are some people that think no movies are art. Like, movies are just not art to them. And that's fine. And there are some people that think that abstract splashes of paint are art and worth billions of dollars. Put a pin on the corkboard, because that's a whole discussion about modern art and the finances around it. We can probably do an episode about that some other day. But I digress. I am someone that still, perhaps irrationally, clings to the hopeful notion that movies can achieve some of the goals or ideas of what art is supposed to do. And art is entirely subjective. Like some people think that art can only be defined by X, Y, and Z, and other people accept that life itself is art. We are artists expressing ourselves every which way possible. Okay, so for the record, I have and always will continue to express myself about what's going on in the world, sometimes through other people's voices. If you're interested in the ideas and themes and subjects and events that I'm concerned with, check out my social media and be sure to visit my reblog tabs or whatever platform it is. If it lets you repost other people's stuff, pay attention to what I've been reposting and engage in the discussion. Because I think that there are too many things to discuss. There are so many things going on in the world that we need to address. Why am I talking about this movie? Because I'm struggle busing to try to find an audience here on the internet, and you got to jump on the bandwagon of popular things. And right now, Supergirl, for whatever reason, is a subject of much discussion. Let me put this in preview mode to try and help the quality of the video. And having addressed the simple reality that the world is a dumpster fire that we're all trapped in, and that there are plenty of things that categorically are objectively more critical, let us take a moment to breathe and let those things sit over there, maybe as a collection of imaginary pins on the corkboard that we might come back to in the not too distant future. And please note, I do indeed have a 10-year backlog of audio-only podcasts available for you to explore should you earnestly and genuinely want to know where I stand on things, what I've said about stuff in the past. It's all there for you to explore. Is it the best podcast? Is it the best podcast ever? No, even I don't think that. Is my podcast and all my other content, when I speak my mind about things going on in the world, real, raw, and radically unscripted and ridiculously earnest? Yes. Does that mean that sometimes I stumble on my own words and have to reset and start over? Absolutely. I don't have a script. I don't write down what I talk about before I talk about it. Well, that's not entirely true. Sometimes I do. But am I reading off a script right now? Absolutely not. I do not have a teleprompter, and I always try to acknowledge when I'm reading from something, whether it's someone else's words or my own. Speaking of which, I do have a delightful little collection of thoughts and things that formulate the central spine of my thoughts in reaction to having seen Supergirl and having been observing the public discourse around it from before and now since it dropped on its opening day. Where to begin? I don't know. Actually, I do think I know. One of the things I'm going to try to do is simultaneously, as I speak to you live on the stream, I'm also going to try and... I forgot to set up the... Look at me being totally underprepared. I forgot to set up... Oh, that'll work, even though the angle's a little funny. I was going to set up a tripod to use my phone to also make individual clips or individual, mini reels as we talk about this stuff live on this stream. So anyways, blah, blah, blah. Is anyone actually watching yet? Let's go see if we've got viewers in the thing. There's 0 viewers according to Twitch. Well, hopefully someone will show up eventually, but at least that green line looks really good. Rock on. No, I wanted to do this. So I apologize. I haven't done that automated script reading opening. Ugh. Why are my numbers on OBS yuckier than usual? I thought we were in a good place with all our settings. Good grief. Okay. Let's hope for the best. So, Supergirl. I've had a lot of thoughts, and as per usual, I'm a bit late to the party. I didn't publish anything about Supergirl before seeing it, and I haven't published anything about Supergirl except for the little teasers saying that I was about to start dropping things about it since, because in part I wanted to take a little bit of time to see how the public discourse around it evolved since people actually started watching it. And I'm happy to see that there are people out there actually speaking up for the movie. And I think one of the most common statements being made is it amazing? Is it the best movie ever? No. Does it deserve the trolling and the hate that it's gotten from the trolls spewing hate at it? Also, absolutely no. I think one of the more critical things that I think might be worth speaking on at the top of it is a reaction to let me reset and also press record on this thing. So, talking about Supergirl, I think one of the first things I want to talk about is not my opinion of the movie itself, but rather my reaction to a certain demographic who has been preemptively spewing lots of garbage nonsense statements about it. And this goes out to all the trolls and blatant chauvinists out there whose only commentary is about the actress's looks. If all you can do is post petty, sexist, chauvinist statements about Millie Alcock's appearance, then you need to grow the F up and get some therapy. Now, there's plenty to talk about with this movie, but those particular people making that kind of commentary aren't contributing to any of the authentic, general, intellectually honest discussion about the movie as a movie. They're just spewing nonsense and judging a human being on their looks. And odds are they probably couldn't take the heat if someone focused that kind of commentary on them. So why are they out there spewing things? Sexism is not okay. Chauvinist, toxic bullying of women based exclusively on their looks is malarkey. And if that's all you got, it's not much, and it's not the flex you think it is, and it's a clear indication that you need to go to therapy. All right, we made that little clip. I don't know if I'm going to post it right now because it takes longer than it feels like it ought to go through the platforms and share all of that stuff. So I might just be storing those as we go along. But I said what I said, and I stand by it. It's ridiculous that this is somehow considered normal. To grow the F up. The movie in and of itself there's plenty to talk about. And there's plenty of pretty valid criticisms about it. Not everyone is going to like every choice made in every movie. Where to begin, though, on that side of things? I need to take a look at some of my notes, because I've gathered in the course of time, as I've been observing the discourse around it, 6 of what I consider the weakest criticisms of Supergirl. Let's run through the list real quick of just how I've gathered these as an idea. There's probably other things people are saying, but these are the 6 seemingly like goofiest things that are dressed up as legitimate criticisms of the movie that I think are absolutely laughable. 1, and I am consolidating lots of different people's things into bullet points, okay? But 1, the general claim that there is no plot, or that the plot sucked. I don't get how people get to that. We'll talk about it in a second. I've seen a lot of other people dismissing this movie as, quote, just about her fighting a guy to save her dog. Wow. Were those people just willfully not paying attention to everything else happening in the movie? Because that's not the only thing happening in this movie. Then there's, of course, the chorus of people shouting that it isn't an exact replication of the source material, which, if I'm not mistaken, is a series or a run in the comics called Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. I have a whole response to that, which we'll talk on. But I think it's just absolutely silly when that's the criticism people bring to any superhero movie. And we'll get into why. What's another one? Oh, people complaining about the soundtrack and specifically the needle drop. But also, I mean, people just don't like that infamous needle drop. If you don't know what that is, go see the movie. Decide for yourself whether or not you think it works. But there's also sort of a broader complaint that the way the movie uses music doesn't, quote, make sense, and that it's James Gunn trying to make this be just like Guardians of the Galaxy. And I think that's a bit of a stretch and a pretty weak one, in my opinion. We'll talk about that in a second. There's a lot of people complaining that she's underpowered. Some people have said the word crippled. And there's a perfectly reasonable reason why this happens in the movie. And those criticizing it on that issue would understand if they paid a little more attention, I think. And then the weirdest one, I think the weakest complaint, or the one that says a lot more about the people complaining than the movie itself, the villain is not enough. The villain's not scary enough, not epic enough, not bad guy enough. He's too generic. There's a whole bunch of variations on it, but that the villain just isn't sufficient. And boy, oh boy, do I have some thoughts on that. All right. So here we go. I am now going to be reading, as I have just been for a hot second, from my notes. Because, you know, I got to have notes. But these are all my actual genuine thoughts, many of which I've already shared on social media. In fact, some of these things are things that I initially wrote in response to something on social media and then collected here in this little notepad to remember and be able to get back to it. So the no plot thing. I think one of the biggest problems in our social media discourse right nowadays seems to be that people haven't been buying dictionaries and have not been using them very efficiently, even if they own them, for some time now. And it's starting to show. The people who say there is no plot, I have to ask, do you understand what plot is? And I don't mean that in a mean, bullying way. I just mean, like, honestly, you're making a claim, but do you understand what that word is? And so for those who don't know what that is, let's do a quick review, a little recap on what plot means. I'm now reading from something I wrote earlier. In storytelling, the plot is the framework of events and situations that drive the narrative forward. It basically answers the question, what happened? Story arc plots typically follow a simple progression. We start with exposition, right? The opening sequences, which introduce characters and the overall setting of the show. Did Supergirl introduce Supergirl and her setting and her immediate background and the context that got her to the setting? Absolutely. And in fact, I think that's one of the best aspects of the script. There's a lot of people complaining about the script, saying it's terrible and lousy, and I really don't get why. Except for maybe, not to jump ahead of myself, but maybe because the script is rooted in a woman's perspective. Maybe that's what's triggering some of these people. We'll come back to that issue in a hot second. But I would have to respond that, yeah, there's some pretty solid exposition in Supergirl. Then we get the rising action, introducing the conflict that builds tension. This connects to the it's just John Wick in space. For those of you who say this has no plot, how can it have no plot if it literally is checking off these boxes and people are comparing it to other movies' plots? Okay. Then, of course, all of that tension building escalates and we get a climax, which is the turning point, the peak moment where everything changes. And we clearly have that in this movie. And we'll talk about what it is and how it works in a hot second. And then, of course, there's the falling action after the climax, and that unravels the consequences of the climax. We get to a new place through the course of the falling action. And the resolution. Something that basically wraps up the story and tells us this is where it ends. All right. So I wrote, having reviewed the definition and its structures, when it comes to narrative storytelling, the only response I have to this criticism is that if Supergirl has no plot, then no movie ever has had a plot. What is the plot of Supergirl? A young woman in her early 20s has to escape the remnants of her destroyed planet, adapt to a new place, decide if she wants to call it home, adopt the cultural expression of the place, learn its language or languages, because if she learned English, she obviously could have learned other languages, right? And then make a decision about whether or not this is where she's going to call home. That's all in there, right? So this movie clearly has a plot. Clearly. It is not missing any of the essential components of story, narrative, plot as traditionally structured. Does it make interesting choices about how to structure it? Sure. But is it missing a plot? No. Now, we can have a much more nuanced discussion about whether or not the plot is effective, whether or not it takes us on a journey that reveals interesting information about the characters involved. And I would answer, yes, it does. It would seem to me that the use of this criticism says more about the person using it than it does about the movie itself. These are lazy movie watchers. If this is their fundamental criticism of the movie, then they just were being lazy while watching the movie. And or they didn't watch the movie. There are plenty of people preemptively claiming that this movie and the story it tells is garbage, who then admit they haven't even seen it yet, and they're basing it all on the stuff that they're seeing online. That's one of the reasons why I typically refuse to watch trailers, refuse to read too much of the discussion around a movie. I like to limit how much of that I consume to a certain very small amount just to get a sense about whether or not I want to find out for myself about a given movie, what's going on with it. Okay. So to conclude about the plot, I think it's a patently absurd criticism. And then I wrote, I won't respond to it any further, rather than to say you are either not paying attention or you didn't like the elements of the plot, but refuse to analytically explain your reason why. And we'll come back to that in a hot minute, because I do have a little bit of a theory about what may or may not be going on. So now some people, speaking of plot, right? Some people say that the plot is just about her trying to save her dog. Is this John Wick in space? I mean, that's a fun comparison. And sure, there's common elements. The dog. Although it's different, right? John Wick is out for revenge because the dog is no longer there. And in this case, Supergirl is out to save her dog and prevent that calamity from happening. So I have to ask, do people think that this kind of trolling is facetious and clever? Or, again, are they just seriously choosing to not pay attention? Because there's a lot of things going on beyond that. She's doing so much more than just fighting a guy because he poisoned her dog. Oh, I am so sorry. I forgot to open this with spoiler alert. I am going to talk about what happens in this movie. It's been out long enough that you've either already heard enough to know what happens in the movie or you've seen it. If you're on the fence, please be advised. I don't think I've given up too many spoilers just yet. I think I've talked about stuff that generally is sort of understood about the movie based on the trailers. And if I've already spoiled something for you, I apologize. Please feel free to stop watching this if you're watching in the present tense or in the not too distant future on the archive here on the Purple app, Twitch, or in the YouTube archive in the not too distant future. Please feel free to come back to it after. Or if you're the kind of person like me that if I want to know what is being discussed, I don't care about spoilers. I know I just said I try to avoid spoilers, but that's mostly from the trailers because I don't mind knowing what happens ahead of time. I don't want to see the imagery because then that image isn't new to me. Knowing what happens doesn't ruin the fun because I still don't know how it happens, how it's displayed, how it plays out on the screen. So there you go. There's your delayed and unfortunately probably very misplaced spoiler alert. So what else is going on in this movie? She's not just fighting some guy that poisoned her dog, right? I think this is pretty central to my overall understanding of the movie that I frankly think a lot of people missed or refused to understand. She, as a character, at the center of her journey, I think it's one of the central themes of this plot. She is wrestling with a choice, right? That was thrust upon her. She's wrestling with the decision of whether or not to even embrace Earth as her home and whether or not to accept the superpowers that come with that. And also, she's trying to decide whether or not to join her cousin in the act of taking on the responsibility of being a superhero. And out of everybody criticizing the movie, and even people praising the movie, I haven't seen very many people talk about it. Surely there are people out there talking about this because I haven't seen everything possible. There's plenty of content creators that I follow who I have not yet seen whether or not they've put out a Supergirl review or not. But I think that is one of the central themes that are explored, and there's just not a lot of direct, overt dialogue. Like, she never says this explicitly, but that does not mean that it is not a core theme that is clearly being explored. The other bit about this is that she's not just trying to rescue her dog. Once she finds out about who this bad guy is, and of course this connects to the criticism of the bad guy not being a bad guy, or an impressive enough bad guy, or a scary enough bad guy, or however people are putting it. Once she finds out what's going on there, she then is confronted by another choice. Like, it brings the whole thing about, am I going to become a superhero or not? Because that's what's happening, right? Let's go off on a tangent. I'm going to skip. I don't know where else I was going in the next thing. I'm not looking at the text anymore there. And I probably have something written about this here, but I'm just going to talk about it freelance. If I don't have my glasses on, I'm not reading from any of my notes because I can't make out the letters anymore. We join this movie. When this movie starts, she is not Supergirl. I mean, she says that that's what people call her on Earth, which makes sense, right? let's talk about the backstory. Let's talk about the flashbacks. Something that I think people just didn't pick up on, especially the people trolling it, is that, first of all, I want to praise the movie. We didn't get any direct backstory, right? We got that opening moment, which I think was really great, because one of the things that I personally, despite loving superhero movies, that I get a little tired of is when we rehash the origin story over and over and over again. Sometimes we don't need to go back to the very beginning. In Superman, last year, we got a really interesting recap that then dropped us into the middle of the ongoing action. We didn't see Kal-El become Clark in that movie. He's already there. He's already on Earth. He's been there for X amount of time, right? He's a full-grown man. He's 33 years old. Put a pin on the corkboard. That's one of those like Superman is Jesus kind of things. And it was great. I love that opening moment. It was awesome. And for me, the backstory flashbacks that we get in Supergirl I think are pretty awesome, because it gives us just enough to like revisit that backstory, but from a different perspective, from Kara's perspective, which, is inherently a woman's perspective. We see, before she's even born, the destruction of Krypton, something we did not see in Superman last year. We see the city, I forget the city's name and I don't have it in front of me, but we see the survival of her city. Totally canon from comic book. We see her living in that city and dealing with grief and the loss of her family members. I believe it's her mother who's dying, and everyone else is clearly sick. And we see her escape from that city because it's doomed. She has to abandon everything. And as brief and as short and as simple as those flashbacks were, if we're paying attention, we get enough information to understand that she arrives on Earth unable to understand English, unaware of the powers she's about to get, and dealing with that adjustment. She is someone in that gap between the culture she left behind and the culture she now finds herself in. And this also connects to the whole criticism of the music, which we'll weave together here. Some people were saying that it makes absolutely no sense why she would have a Walkman. And of course, that's just James Gunn trying to make... No. I mean, is it a little bit of a visual nod? Sure. Does that make the story... Does that make that element suck? Absolutely not. I probably have this later on in my notes, but I'll jump on it right now. It makes perfect sense. And we get this one scene in... I don't know if it's her own apartment or if it's like the spare bedroom in Clark's apartment, but she's there on Earth. We see that... why am I blanking on the dog's name? I'm blanking on the dog's name. I'm terrible at names. I can see his face, his floppy ear. But we see that the dog is grown up. He's a little larger, a little bigger. He's having fun flying around being a goofball. And she is listening to Earth music and looking out across the vista that she has from the window, right? And sort of like, it's a silent sequence. I don't remember if she says much, but that scene made a lot of sense to me emotionally. Maybe because I'm someone that went through that process as a fictional character from a book series you've never heard of. I'm a robot from Parallax Dimension, stranded here on Earth. So I deeply synergize and empathize with that theme that's explored, not just in the backstory, but also a little bit later on, and I'll save that commentary about her silent scream in space. But she's coping with this adjustment, right? She's had to learn English. She's got to explore the culture of Earth. And anyone in that situation, whether it's an immigrant in a new country or a robot from another dimension trapped here on Earth dealing with human beings, anyone in that kind of situation is going to naturally, organically connect with aspects of the new culture they are immersed in and embrace them, right? She's going to discover music that she likes. She's going to identify bands that she's into. So why does she have the music while she's away from Earth? Because she's going through this adjustment period, right? Adapting to the culture, adapting to the language, adapting to her superpowers, which only exists on planets with a yellow sun. She did not have these powers on Krypton. I'm fairly certain that that is canon. Now, obviously, James Gunn is taking creative license with canon and tweaking things in all these movies, right? And that touches on the theme of the difference between a direct adaptation and inspiration taken from source material, which we'll circle back to. Pin on the corkboard. So to me, it makes perfect sense that when she does go off planet from Earth to get drunk on a red sun planet and celebrate her birthday and commiserate the difficulties she's been going through, it makes perfect sense that she would bring with her the music and the fashion that she connected with on Earth. I don't understand how anyone thinks that this is anything other than that. There was a whole bunch of argumentation that it's James Gunn trying to make it a James Gunn movie. He didn't direct this movie. He executive produced it. Did he probably set some ideas, set some standards, set some goals? Of course. But he didn't direct it. He didn't music design it. He probably personally didn't choose the music. I saw one comment somewhere that, like, how the heck did those Earth songs get on the jukebox on the foreign planet? It didn't. She clearly plugs in whatever device she's listening to her music with into the jukebox and then uses that to play the music. Again, lazy viewership. It's right there. Why did she have Earth music with her? Why is she listening to it? Because we don't have Kryptonian music. Duh. She doesn't have Kryptonian music. She doesn't have Kryptonian band t-shirts to wear. She showed up with nothing but the spacesuit she was wearing, right? She didn't even have the costume, which is something that's been dealt with differently in different iterations of Superman. If I remember correctly, in the Christopher Reeves interpretation of his backstory, the materials from which his ma makes the costume were part of the bedding in the baby crib of his spaceship. But that's the Christopher Reeves version, right? So yeah, I think all of that make perfect sense. It isn't weird nostalgia baiting. It's the opposite of whatever nostalgia is. When you discover a new band, you start listening to that new band obsessively until it becomes part of your inner emotional landscape, right? That's what she's going through. That's what she's dealing with. And this speaks to a larger theme. She's not a superhero yet. Not really. She's not officially Supergirl. She's wrestling with whether or not she's going to accept that invitation. Yes, we saw her in Superman wearing the uniform. We don't know exactly where that is placed. It is entirely possible that that moment from Superman happens after Supergirl, but before the final scene in Supergirl, like after the main action of Supergirl, now that I say that, it makes a little bit less sense than it did at first, because at the very end of Supergirl, she reconnects with Clark and is wearing the suit. But I feel that, like, she does leave again to go drinking again, so we could argue that, oh look, we have our first chat bot message in the chat. You have been denied. Okay. I would argue, and I don't know for sure, I would love to find out from someone that knows, But I would argue that the little itty bitty scene, was it a kicker or was it just at the end of the main action of the movie? Was it denouement or was it a credits scene? I don't remember off the top of my head. But when she shows up to get Crypto, the dog, that's right. I can't believe I forgot his name a hot second ago. She's like, hey, where's my dog? We could argue that that's somewhere in the middle of... You know what? I don't know where that fits now that I think about it even more deeply. I'm not going to give it credit it doesn't deserve. Because Crypto's with her the entire time, except for when obviously he's sick and she leaves him there with the witchy woman alien lady. But we could imagine that moment happens just before Supergirl. The main action of Supergirl begins, right? She's gone off. Here's the way I'm trying to imagine the sequence of events. She arrives on Earth, as we see in the flashback in Supergirl. She doesn't know English. She's got to learn it. She doesn't know Earth culture. She's got to adapt to it. Crypto grows up. He gets to the size that he is in Superman. She decides to go away to do something. I don't know what. She's been offered. We do see Superman present her the Supergirl outfit and explain to her it's super colorful because we want people to know that we're good guys. That's why we look goofy. That's why we chose a silly, campy colored outfit instead of something dark and ominous. We could imagine that sequence, like the flashback sequence happens. She puts on the Supergirl outfit and to try it out and then decides to go off world, right? And then she comes back to Earth wearing the Supergirl outfit so that Earthlings know who she is. She comes back, gets her dog, leaves because she's still wrestling with the question, do I really want to wear this silly costume and do superhero things? And when we get to the main action of Supergirl, she's leaning in the direction of rejecting that, right? And then all the action of Supergirl unfolds and we get to a point where she makes a decision. All right, let's get back to my notes. I would love to find out where exactly that Superman sequence where we first get introduced to her falls in terms of a real timeline. But it makes sense somewhere where I've put it. Not after Supergirl. My intuition was leading me in the wrong direction. Just before the main action of Supergirl, but after the flashback sequences. Right? But okay. My point here, though, is that it is clear we are being told by the plot that she's not Supergirl yet, not officially. Clark has invited her to join him in this superheroing activity. She's taken the suit, but she hasn't committed to it yet. And as we see in the opening sequence of Supergirl, she's sort of tossed it aside, and it's sort of something she's ignoring. Okay. So she's wrestling with whether or not to even embrace her superpowers and join her cousin in the superhero game. That's part the note where I'm reconnecting, right? She's out there trying to just mind her own business, just trying to literally drown her sorrows in booze and good times and dancing. And then she comes across this problematic situation and this character, Ruthie, who we get all of that backstory. And yes, the details of Ruthie were changed from the comic book. That brings us to the next point, adaptation versus inspiration. But I just want to tie this up by pointing out that when she first gets the information about what Ruthie's going through, she's like, not my circus, not my monkeys. She doesn't want to get involved. And then the plot develops, her dog gets poisoned, and she's got to do more than what she wanted to do, which is now she's got to save her dog. And in the course of doing that, she learns even more information about this guy that poisoned her dog, which tips her over to deciding, I got to do something. And that's what Clark is talking about. This is what Kal-El is like. This is what we do here. right? And we can connect that to the main, somewhat controversial, I guess, aspect of Superman the movie, about his parents and the message and the second half of the message. But let's put that up on the corkboard for if I ever get around to doing a review of Superman, which I should have, could have, would have done a year ago, but I haven't because I've been struggling with burnout and writer's block and all that. Okay. So not only does she decide to join or to assist Ruthie in her pursuit of justice, she also realizes that Ruthie is hellbent on revenge. I think a lot of people don't understand that revenge is not justice. Like, categorically, they are not the same. Unfortunately, in a lot of media, they get conflated. Characters are often confronted with an injustice, and they say that justice must be pursued, and then what they actually go after is revenge. And that's a theme that we really should re-examine in terms of how it is dealt with in our pop culture, in our media, in our storytelling. Because I think it is unhealthy and toxic that we have merged and conflated in our pop culture brains justice and revenge. But we can put that up as a pin on the corkboard because that's a broader theme that is not inherently specific to this movie or this script. Okay, where were we? But yeah, so ultimately, like, how do people fail to comprehend that all of that is going on and that this movie has that much, complexity to it? When people say that it's boring or bland or it's just a series of action sequences, and like, did you miss all of these details? Or did you just refuse to take them into account? Okay, so adaptation versus inspiration. Let's talk about that. To read from what I wrote and then, springboard off of that. Here's what I wrote. Probably, I think, very much specifically in response to someone whose entire criticism was that it failed to be exactly like the comic book. And here's what I gotta say. It seems like everyone complaining about the movie not being a direct one-to-one recreation of the comic book needs to buy a dictionary and comprehend the difference between a direct adaptation and a movie inspired by selected source material. And here's what I got to say about it as a criticism. Did anyone promise you that this would be a direct adaptation? I know that at one point, the title was being considered, and then they changed it. It's just called Supergirl. I've been pretty clear in my understanding from months before the movie came out that this is not a direct adaptation. Mind you, in my humble opinion, even a direct adaptation of a movie will take artistic liberties in the process of adapting it from a printed medium to action on a screen. Sometimes you have to, because there's either too much going on in the book or some passages in the book or aspects of the way the book is written cannot be directly filmed, right? But this was never promised, I don't think. And I'm sure some people might point to some really early statements and the fact that very early on they did use the exact title. But that quickly got dropped, I think. I don't feel like I was promised a direct one-to-one adaptation of the comic book. Now, disclosure, I should fully disclose here, friends. I'm a comic book movie fan. I'm not a reader of comic books. Some people would say that makes me, that disqualifies me from commenting. But I think that's ridiculous because the movies are not the comics. Even if they are a direct adaptation. The movies are movies. Period. So yeah, from the beginning of my experience, from when I first heard about Supergirl, I heard that there's this comic book series, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. And it was the starting point, the inspiration, the the primary source material from which this movie would draw its inspiration. So people who clung to an expectation that it would be a direct adaptation, I think you just created an expectation that was unwarranted and set you up for disappointment. I never bothered to do that. In fact, I never bothered to anticipate any superhero movie to be a direct one-to-one representation. Do I love it when they draw from comic book canon? Yes. Do I think that they should absolutely have the artistic liberty to adapt away from the canon? Sure. It's a movie. Do I sometimes think that some, comic book movies go too far and add things that weren't necessary? Of course. But again, I don't think that this criticism is particularly valid because it isn't. I don't feel we were ever promised it to be a direct adaptation. Okay, I feel like I already talked through my music, my thoughts on the music point, but let's review what I actually read. Let's reread what I actually wrote. So, complaints about the music. I feel that the complaint feels rooted in a lack of comprehension regarding the context of her journey. Again, reading. I've seen people complain that Kara would not know or care about any of this music. But again, if one actually pays attention to the flashbacks, one can discern from the context clues that she has been on Earth for some reasonable amount of time before she leaves to go wallow in her misery and get drunk, before she goes to celebrate, her 23rd birthday? So I love the soundtrack because it represents the things that she's found in the... I'm not reading anymore. I love the soundtrack because it represents things she's found in our culture that she likes. Let's see what I wrote. The trolls complaining about the music in the movie, have no taste in music because I loved every music track selected. Whether it was a cover of some classic rock song or a completely new song, I dug it. And B, they didn't get the point that Kara having music as she partied away from Earth. I've already said all this. She is acclimating to Earth's culture as her journey begins and would naturally have found music that she's connected to during that time that she spent on Earth learning English and getting to know the new home, getting to know the new culture. She was on Earth long enough to have learned a new language. And anyone who's ever bothered to put the effort in to learn a new language knows that isn't easy. It doesn't happen overnight. That was not in what I wrote. During that time, she would naturally be curious about Earth, its culture, and start picking for herself the songs and movies and other media and fashion choices that she feels a connection to. So the entire criticism is that the music is meant to create an unrealistic sense of nostalgia. That's just absurd, I think. It seems that this is one of those places where people try to stretch their criticism to include some ridiculous idea that Gunn is trying to emulate Guardians of the Galaxy. Does Gunn have a signature? Yes. Does he have a style, an aesthetic, a vision? Absolutely. But from the different projects I've seen, there's connective tissue, and then there's the places where that connective tissue leaves plenty of room for difference. And the point being, I lost my place. Guardians of the Galaxy is explicitly about nostalgia. Because what's his name did grow up on Earth, right? And he is longing to return to it. But here in this movie, it's about her getting to know Earth and getting to know the artists of Earth. It's not nostalgia. It's whatever. Like I said before, it's not nostalgia. It's the inverse of nostalgia. It's her finding things that she loves. I feel like I'm being redundant reading this because I've already essentially said it all. She's literally struggling to accept with whether or not to call Earth her new home. During the majority of this movie, she doesn't have a home. Not in her mind. She feels not at home on Earth yet. And she's struggling with the invitation to decide to call that place her new home. And again, reading from my notes, anyone going through that kind of cultural exploration would naturally be discovering musicians and artists and other cultural touchstones that resonate with them, despite being totally unfamiliar. Okay. So the complaint that she is too weak or crippled or limited in this, off the top of my head, she's intentionally going to planets with red suns where she does not have superpowers. So stuff happens in this movie in those locations. So why would she have superpowers? They didn't cripple her just because she's overpowered. She made a choice as a character because she wants to explore her misery and attempting to drown it in partying, right? And who hasn't ever wanted to do that? To escape the burdens of their responsibilities, to just unwind and be not sober. I'm not endorsing over partying. I'm not endorsing alcoholism. I'm just saying, who hasn't, had a drink or two and stepped away from their normal reality to try to vent pressure? All right, let's see what I actually wrote. During the course of this movie, as our introduction to the cinematic universe, Kara is not yet decided, as her introduction into this cinematic universe, Kara has not yet decided to be a superhero. I wrote that in capital letters. She hasn't decided yet. At the beginning of this movie, she's not Supergirl. She has the costume, but she's not taking on the responsibility. So she's not crippled in this movie. She's dealing with the discovery that on Earth and other yellow suns, she has powers that she did not have growing up with. So I think a lot of the complaints about this particular issue may stem from the misunderstanding that Kryptonians might have always had those powers, that we see them use on Earth, but they obviously don't. On Krypton, everyone is normal. Scientifically advanced, perhaps, but effectively normal. Now, that's, I think, technically not true in the Snyderverse, but that's the Snyderverse. Have there been different iterations of that in the comic books? Probably. Again, and I apologize. People will probably criticize me for this, but I'm a comic books movie fan. And I'm an admirer of comic book art, but I've never bought comic books and I've hardly read any. I used to do this all the time. I used to go to comic book stores and flip through the pages, not to read them, but to get lost in the art. And then I would go watch movies, right? As a way of seeing that art interpreted in a film. Anyways, that's her journey. She's going to other planets where she does not have the power so she can enjoy being normal. She's coping with the adjustment that she would have had to make if she had decided to stay on Earth permanently. She's not ready to make that commitment yet, in my opinion. When we first meet her, and I know I've said this several times already, but I cannot stop emphasizing it because I think it's lost on people. She is not a superhero when this movie begins. She is just Kara, right? And reading from my notes again. And her cousin, that she's only just met for the first time, happens to be Superman. And he has invited her and is encouraging her to join him in becoming a superhero. And I mean, that's epic plot. That's beautiful character motivation and growth. Or at least that's the framework by which we get character motivation and growth. Back to the note. As she and her new friend, Ruthie, pursue their two different goals, because when she finally says, fine, I'll help you, Kara is indeed doing it mostly for the selfish reasons that she really wants to save her dog. She's not really interested in Ruthie's desire for revenge at first. And if I remember correctly, she kind of tries to talk her out of it a little bit. It's like, dude, this is not worth it. She confronts this invitation to take on the symbolic mantle of, back to the notes, right? So as she changes her mind, right? At first she wants nothing to do with the craziness. Then she's like, okay, we're going to have to take care of this. We're going to have to do something. She confronts this invitation to take on the symbolic mantle of donning the cape and the suit to commit to being a superhero. Because the bad guys, the context of the bad guy, and her understanding of what the bad guy has done and is doing evolves. And for me, this was fun, awesome, enjoyable character growth. Right? Right. Okay, so now we have to talk about the villain. The villain is not important enough, epic enough, scary enough, whatever enough. Somebody, unless I misunderstood, I think someone and if I misunderstood, then my comment in response to them will sound dumb. But I saw a comment where I thought they were essentially saying this dude doesn't feel any different than the Ravagers from Guardians of the Galaxy, which I say malarkey. Those guys, whilst being piratey and outlawed, they are outlaws working on the fringe of whatever societies they do their thing in. They would never traffic in children. That's literally the whole point of why they do not take what's his name to his supposed dad in the second movie, right? But we'll leave that up there as something to talk about when we come full circle and eventually do a Guardians of the Galaxy episode. When she meets Ruthie and is introduced to the villain that has brutally murdered her entire family in front of her face, she initially wants nothing to do with it. And then she's like, okay, they've crossed the line. Now I've got to do something. And I might as well help you since you're heading that way anyways. Right? So, first of all, is the villain not a bad enough bad guy? I got two things to say. One, purely from a comics perspective, she's not a superhero yet. Why would she be teamed up against the most epic villain from the comic books rogue gallery of bad guys? She wouldn't. Okay? And also, this villain is trafficking children. How is that not nefariously evil enough for people? It seems that some of the men complaining about this movie and saying the bad guy's not a baddie enough, I don't know, like, how do you say that that is not something worth fighting against? Right? They're almost saying, like, why is she fighting him? He isn't, insert name of some more important or bigger or more recognized or more well-known or more overwhelming villain. Combine the two and I think this villain makes perfect sense. She's not a superhero yet. She's getting caught up in something happening locally to where she's just trying to party. And that turns out to be something pretty disgusting. Something that I guess some of these men complaining about the movie wouldn't do anything about. And that says more about them than it does about the movie. Okay? So yeah, I think I kind of covered everything else. Oh, this is something that I wrote on social media. I've already sort of touched on it, but let's read through it to really hammer the point home. Seeing a lot of the totally irrelevant, hateful comments across multiple posts about Supergirl, including my own, I noticed a bit of a pattern. It seems like a lot of the hate is coming from men who arguably might be getting triggered by the villain. Next to the claim of no plot, which is laughable, the other most common complaint is that the bad guy is not impressive. The bad guy is an abusive, toxic masculinity chud abuser who is kidnapping young women to force them into unwanted unions to maintain what is literally identified as an all-male cult. If movies are striving to be art, art is striving to show us ourselves. This is the touchstone where I said, good for them. Just like, okay, what did everyone get offended by in Superman? Besides all the nonsense about it being too campy or it not being dark enough or whatever. The whole conflict in Superman, I guess we might as well count this as a Superman review. The whole conflict in James Gunn's Superman is that Superman stopped an illegal and immoral invasion and attempted genocide by a made-up country against another made-up country. Most of us understood what that was an allegory for. That was an analogy or an allegory or a comics or a satire or whatever you want to call it. It was commenting on our world. People are profiteering on that war. That war has been declared illegal and immoral by multiple nations, by the UN, and by the International Criminal Court. Okay? And it has been, in my estimation, and I know that this word is one of those words, but that war has been judged an ethnic cleansing. Let's use that one because the G word is currently seemingly much more actively searched for. And they represent that in that movie and say, hey, it's wrong to profiteer on this. It is immoral and wrong. People were going to die. And all the excuses, Clark is explicit. It's in that discussion that the argument he has with Lois that puts their relationship on the rocks before he gets all caught up in the rest of the action. People were going to die. And the excuses for not getting involved made no sense. He had the power to stop it. And he did. In as peaceful a manner as he could have. He didn't decimate the invading army. He had a conversation. He stopped them from invading and then had an impressive, like an attempt to talk some. He had a conversation that was, over the top because he's Superman. That's what I meant by impressive. He has a moment with this guy and he's like, hey, what you're doing is wrong. And I'm going to stop you. Because I can. Because I have the power. And because what you're doing is wrong. And that's what we get to see in real time with Kara's journey. She gets sucked into someone else's fight for justice and or revenge. And then realizes not only did this guy unalive all of Ruthie's family, he did it so that he could be even more powerful. Something, again, that people didn't seem to comprehend, except to complain that they changed the ownership of the sword. This sword is important because her family of blacksmiths are using a material that in the comic and presumably in the cinematic universe is the equivalent of vibranium in the MCU. It is one of the strongest materials known in intergalactic society. That's what made that family special. Could they have made it a little bit more clear? Sure. Did I have an aha moment about that because of a content creator pointing that out? Yes, and thank you to that content creator. I forget who it was because I've been taking in a lot of Supergirl content the last couple days. But it's there, and it's there to establish the significance of the sword. Now, people are complaining that sword belonged to what's his name already. Okay, cool. How did he get it in the comic books? I don't know. But is it plausible that he could have gotten it from a family of blacksmiths that dealt exclusively with this really important material and then he unalived them all? Yeah. So they just merged those to make it why Ruthie's family was unalived, right? And also, it's just one sentence, but there's something about this. There's something said about this guy that he's pretty effing powerful. And he's displayed as being pretty effing powerful. He like catches a tank, doesn't he? Or am I misremembering? One of the downsides of waiting to respond to a movie is that my memory does get a little hazy. But if that's not a bad enough bad guy for a superhero who's like, shit, I really got to do something. Yeah, well, I guess this means I got to be a superhero. I don't know what kind of bad guy they would have preferred. But it wouldn't have made sense for her to go up against Darkseid in their first movie. He's the ultimate bad guy in that universe. We haven't seen him at all yet. I think that the choice of bad guys made perfect sense. I think the choice of the way she discovers more and more information about him, which forces her to make a stand, makes perfect sense. That is Kara's journey of character growth. So it seems odd to me that men in particular, men who are, and this is a Venn diagram that's almost a perfect circle, the men who are complaining about the character, not everybody. If you aren't complaining about both, I apologize. I'm not trying to pretend that you are. But there are people who are like, this bad guy is not bad enough. And there are people who are like, she doesn't deserve the role because she's unfuckable. She's unattractive. Her forehead is too big. Y'all need to go get some therapy. Because if human trafficking is not something that you would, if you had superpowers, stand up to, what the is wrong with you? Seriously. And if all you've got to say about a woman-centered superhero character is that you wish she was hotter, what the F is wrong with you? Right? Objectifying women is not normal, is not healthy, is not sane. Go get therapy. All right. I think I had one final bit to say here. Oh, yeah. As a fictional character from a foreign dimension myself, the depiction of Kara's acclimation to the planet Earth and her journey as she determines whether or not she feels at home there and whether or not she will answer the call to join her cousin to take on the responsibility of being a superhero. Because as we know, with that much power comes great responsibility, to borrow from the other comic book cinematic universe. All of that really resonates with me. I think, like, for example, something I didn't include in my notes here, but that I know I wrote about in someone else's social media post, is like that silent scream in space. People are mocking her because of the way her hair looks, instead of addressing the emotional content there. I felt that pain. That was moving to me. That is her hitting the last straw and being outraged by the frustration that she feels. Right? And that's the moment when she crosses the threshold of not my circus, not my monkeys, to I have great power. Therefore, I must take on great responsibility about doing something here about this. Up until then, she'd been trying to just get her dog, and not get her dog because they didn't kidnap him, but save her dog. She'd been trying to achieve a very utilitarian goal, get the antidote. And then she saw all the other things develop and all this other complexity develop. And she realized, I've got to do something. Despite the pain I'm in. Despite the fact that I still haven't mourned the loss of my entire civilization and the planet we were all living on. Right? Okay. I think one of the only criticisms about the movie that I begrudgingly didn't want to agree with, but kind of have to go, yeah, is the color choices for the second half of the movie. The first half of the movie is colorful and bright. The second half of the movie is not so much. But they're also on a barren wasteland of a planet that has two different suns. One being the yellow sun that gives her power, and the other being a green sun that takes away her power. So the one question I had in my mind is, are they saying that green sun is made out of or powered by kryptonite? If I can point to one thing that is truly like a bit of a plot hole, and I've seen plenty of people say that there's plot holes in this movie, but then not point them out, which is like, what plot hole? A content creator who generally I agree with most of the time. By sheer fact that their arguments are usually really cogent, really based in logic, and really rooted in what they see in the content. He says that there's a massive plot hole in the beginning of the movie, but then doesn't discuss it because it's one of his spoiler-free reviews. I don't know what plot hole happens in the beginning of the movie. But there suddenly being a Krypton-powered sun feels a little intense. I get why they used it. I get it makes it, once I accepted it and said I'll have to find out whether or not there are green suns in the comic book canon later on. And I don't even know that whether or not, if I find out that there are not green suns in comic book canon, I'm not a comic book canon absolutist, right? I just like knowing when it is canon, so I can be like rock on for them for using that, especially when it's obscure or not super commonly known. But when people stray away from canon, I evaluate that change on its own merit. I don't just get angry at it because it's not canon. I go, did it work despite not being canon? Did it take us to an interesting place? Did we see something fun and exciting about it? I'm very curious about the origin of this green sun. Is the in-universe explanation that it is somehow got the same chemistry as kryptonite? Okay, I can buy it. If they didn't, that's the one place where like they just established kryptonite as kryptonite in the first movie. It's also, at least on Earth, an exceptionally rare element, which apparently, for reasons they didn't get into, had already all been used up somehow. Which we can give them, benefit of the doubt because he's already been there for 33 years and he's already been a superhero on Earth for X amount of years. I think it's 3 years, right? He arrived on the planet 33 years ago. I think he announced his existence at the age of 30. I'd have to have the image in front of me, the 33333, but it was all different functions of 3. Other than that, this movie, in my opinion, oh, whoops, wow, excuse me. Other than the question of why didn't they explain a green sun a little bit better and or explicitly use the word kryptonite regarding the sun, like they just call it the green sun and say, and they kind of, hope the audience puts it together that the connective, color coding, green stands for kryptonite. They could have just explicitly said, this is an exceptionally rare sun whose like physics is rooted in the chemistry of kryptonite. So the question then becomes, is in canon, or at least based on the movies, my understanding that kryptonite is kryptonite because it comes from Krypton. Now, in Krypton, it does not have it might be a toxic element, right? Like there's toxic stuff on Earth that we generally aren't all falling over dead from because we're not exposed to it very often. But if we were to inhale it in large enough quantities or be exposed to it, right? We have radioactive elements here on Earth. And in their natural setting, they typically aren't, causing mass extinction events. So we can interpret Krypton as something like that, a naturally occurring element inside or as part of the composition of the planet of Krypton that probably, we would have to speculatively give it the benefit of the doubt, is toxic but isn't as powerful as it becomes when Superman or a Kryptonian encounters it under the influence of the red sun when he has superpowers. Now I am giving Gunn and his universe a lot of benefit of the doubt there. But if I was going to criticize this movie, it would be about that, not about the music, not even about the needle drop, which I will admit the following did feel a little counterintuitive. It wasn't what I was expecting. I can understand and empathize why people didn't like that needle drop. But I also understand the sound design choices being made there. The lyrics make sense. It all ties into the theme. Here are these two women fighting insurmountable odds, but everything's going to be all right because Kara has embraced both the powers available to her under a yellow sun and the responsibility that comes with those powers to take action against those committing harm on people who cannot defend themselves, right? These supervillains were not underpowered. They were supervillains. They were strong. They were devious. They were doing horrible, immoral things. If I'm going to concede any one thing about that moment is that that could have been a needle drop after the climax of that action, and we could have just had lyric-free, climactic, composed music. If that had been the way it played out, that might have not triggered the outrage as much. I think people might have still mocked the choice because it is an upbeat, campy cover of a song that's about hopefulness and the power of believing that everything is going to be all right. So, there you go. I think I've come full circle. Is this movie the best superhero movie ever? No. But 99.9% of all movies in any of their own genres aren't the best movie in that genre. Because there can only be a few that get that label. And even those, if you get nitpicky and critical and cynical enough, you're going to find flaws. You're going to find things to complain about. People always do. Name your favorite movie and put it out on the internet. People are going to throw a bunch of nonsense at you about why that movie sucks. Or why they didn't like that movie. Or what's wrong with that movie. But does Supergirl deserve the preemptive negative backlash? Absolutely not. More people should be going to go see it, deciding for themselves. If you haven't seen it, that's my final, button. That's the hill I'm standing on. Go see it for yourself. Okay? If you are a Superman fan and you weren't biased against the James Gunn Superman, go see this. This takes us from that movie to the expanded reach of the universe that movie took place in, right? Almost the entirety of Supergirl happens off-world for a reason. In the James Gunn DCU, there's gonna be outer space stuff. Because there's outer space stuff in DC Comics. And all too often, in Superman movies, in Batman movies, and in prior DC movies, we only get a little bit of that because it's them coming to Earth. It's the bad aliens coming to Earth to do something. And basically James Gunn just opened up the way the stories are going to be told so we can go have fun romps and adventures off world. I hope we get to see more of that. And yes, I'm excited to see Man of Tomorrow. I am not going to pretend that it's supposed to be a one-to-one translation of any particular portion of DC Superman comic book series, because it never will be. It is clear to me that what Gunn is doing is giving us his interpretation of these characters, the images we see in the comic books through the lens of his love for the things he loves about them, and those of the creators that he's collaborating with. Will the James Gunn universe have a James Gunn creative stamp on it? Yes. But he's also told us that every movie is going to be its own project. It's going to be directed by different people. They're going to have their own vibe. They're going to each have their own texture and feeling. So there will be connective tissue, making them all, part of the same universe. But they're also going to have their own independent ingredients. And that sounds awesome to me. And yeah, I think the casting here was great. I agree with everyone that agrees with the casting. Some people didn't like Lobo because of reasons. I thought he was fun. From what I understand, that is some of the most spot-on representation from the comic books. He is an immortal that did horrible things and is now out doing his own thing, causing trouble for others, and, fighting others because he's a bounty hunter and he's doing it all for money. But he also clearly has a side to him with a sense of humor and a capacity to appreciate what Supergirl and Ruthie are going through, because he kind of helps them out and he kind of enjoys what, that they win. He sort of cheers for them. So yeah. Is it problematic that Momoa is already two different people? Not Momoa. Yeah, Jason Momoa, right? He's already Aquaman. But that universe doesn't exist anymore technically, so whatever. We're starting over. Will he get his own Lobo movie? Who knows? Would it be awesome if he does? Absolutely. And what else? Yeah, I don't know. Most of, if not all, of the negative criticism fails, in my mind, to be real, intellectually honest criticism based on what I saw on screen. This movie was fun. It was an interesting balance between, that punk rock attitude that we get a taste of in Superman, but taken to a greater length, because Superman likes, what's the name of that punk rock band that he likes that Lois Lane makes fun of him for? Superman has his likes, and some of that rubbed off on her. Right? Superman closes with that movie, because I'm a punk rocker, yes I am, whatever that movie's called. That lyric has been stuck in my head, because one of the things I love about Superman is when he tells Lois, maybe that's the real punk rock. Seeing the beauty in everyone. We can zoom out. This isn't specific to Supergirl. This is, although I've seen it used. In fact, somebody came to one of my posts saying, I don't go to superhero movies to deal with politics. I just want a fun action adventure sequence. And I'm like, then you don't understand comics. You don't understand the source material. Even more than the people claiming that this was not enough of a close adaptation. Because if there's one thing that is absolutely true about both Superman and Supergirl, is that they are drawing their inspiration from the comics. And the comics, no matter how campy or how dark any of their iterations were, any of the runs reached for, each one created by different creators, they go for different vibes, right? But they all always stick to or return to or based on the foundational symbolism, which is inherently political. Superman, Supergirl, they are foreign immigrants. Arguably, technically illegal immigrants because they crash landed here without filing any paperwork. And the only reason we haven't deported them is because if they wanted to, they could defend themselves against every effort, and there would be nothing humanity could do. Now, the thing I liked about the Snyderverse exploration of the darker aspects of Superman is that is one of the philosophical and political themes about Superman. It always has been, whether you realize it or not. He is arguably a god amongst microorganisms. If Superman and Supergirl showed up on Earth today, we couldn't do anything about it except hope that they are as benign, as kind, as empathetic, as caring, as compassionate as they are in the comics and in these iterations of the movies. Because otherwise, we would be fucked. We would be gone. And that comes back down to the fundamental issue of all storytelling. Good versus evil is inherently political. Because in our real world, politics, for better or worse, is easily corrupted and then misused and abused for reasons that are categorically immoral. If you're going to engage in consuming this content, you can't complain about it being political, because these characters are there to hold up a mirror to our reality and say, hey, you don't need to choose violence. You don't need to be all powerful. You don't need to indulge in or allow for corruption. You can stand up to it. We don't have superheroes in this reality. So who else is going to stand up to the madness, the corruption going on in our world that I started this episode commenting about and vaguely referencing? Us. Superheroes are symbols of hope. And cartoonishly exaggerated ways to explore those dynamics of good versus evil, virtue versus corruption, greed versus generosity, right? And if it doesn't hit you that the whole journey we watch her go through is ambivalence, she goes from ambivalence and selfish orientation, I just want to wallow in my own grief and ignore everybody else's problems, to ownership of the responsibility that comes with the powers she's been granted, then you weren't paying attention, man. And that's a powerful arc, which is supposed to be there as a criticism of our world's indifference. There is too much indifference in our world. We are surrounded by corruption. We are surrounded by profiteering. We are surrounded by people doing immoral and illegal things in order to collect more power, hoard more wealth, abuse others, marginalize others, and do immoral and illegal things. And those people who gain almost superpower-like abilities because of their immoral greed to hoard and collect power and money for themselves, those people need to be stood up to. Those people need to be called out for what they are. And who's going to step up to that? We can't sit around and wait for a good guy super oligarch that's going to do the Batman thing. We've had millionaires for a really long time. We've had ultra wealthy people hoarding wealth at the top of society since we invented wealth. And while some of them have done some good things, some things that we should applaud, absolutely zero of them have become Batman. And of course, that is how comic books and therefore the movies inspired by them are inherently political. We can't escape that. And to deny it, to reject it, to complain about it as a feature says more about you than it says about the stuff you're complaining about. So, I don't know. Maybe question why that's your gripe. Maybe look inward and wonder what that means about where you stand. And maybe go to therapy if you can afford it. Because, dude, what are we doing? Accepting and hypernormalizing behavior that in our real life can make some of the villains from comic books look like goofy cartoons, right? We now have trillionaires amongst us, and their products are dangerous, toxic, tyrannical, oppressive, and we cannot sit around waiting for a superpowered space immigrant to save us. We have to band together and realize that we have the power of empathy, the powers of comprehension, of understanding. That's unacceptable. What they are doing is unacceptable, right? And we have the power to stand up to it, call it out, and use whatever abilities, capacities, and resources that we do have at our disposal to try and put an end to it, to try to create reform, to try and inspire change. And that's what I got to say about Supergirl. As always, friends, this has been a real, raw, and ridiculously unscripted and radically underprepared for episode of Mr. Zeppo's Totally Irrelevant Media Review. Formerly a podcast, audio only. Backlogged episodes of some of the movies I've talked about are available over on Sprecher.com. You can find all my links on my link collection page, solo.to/Mr. Zeppo. And of course, you can tune in the not too distant future as I reboot my entire content creation process and workflow and revisit those episodes to re-examine them, find the gems amongst the disorganized, discombobulated episodes, and revisit those themes moving forward as they are still relevant. I've got some podcast episodes from like 8 or 9 years ago that are probably more relevant now, more than ever. And of course, the Zeppoverse world building project, my own fictional action-adventure, superhero-inspired literary universe that I'm stuck developing, not just because I've had a lifelong issue with writer's block, but because it's always been inspired by the wild and crazy things that I see happening in our reality, and that the scale, the rate at which those things have escalated has just been expanding exponentially. Every day, I wake up to new madness, which I'm like, how do I integrate that with what I've already written? I don't know. And then I just kind of spiral in the spinning my wheels part. But we're going to try to put a stop to that and try to come back to almost daily content creation. And I need you to let me know what you think, what you like, what you don't like. I welcome criticism. I'm just going to call you out if your criticism is just third grade level bullying and trolling, because that's not criticism. That's spewing malarkey because you either refuse to understand, or you're incapable of understanding, or you are triggered by the points I'm making and don't want to address the trigger. But yeah, if you haven't seen Supergirl, go see it, please and thank you. And if you're new here, smash the follow button. all the usual things. If you appreciate what I've said here, please make your own magic movie loops about them and share them on my behalf, because I'm hoping there are more people out there that appreciate the perspective that I'm bringing to it, to this kind of public discourse. And it's not going to be limited to just movies. So tune in, share, and all the usual stuff, please and thank you. Namaste. May peace, love, and grooviness be blossoming in your heart. And I hope to see you again soon in the not too distant future. But for now, I am going to bid you a fond farewell. This live episode is now over. Hasta la vista, amigos. And remember, we are all living in a world that we have the power to influence, to change for the better. If people out there have the power and the capacity to make things worse, we have the power to make things better. And that is our calling. That's the invitation to put on our own superhero costumes. We don't need X-ray vision. We don't need laser beam eyeballs. We don't need to be able to fly. We need to be able to stand our ground and speak truth to power and say, hey, that is unacceptable and absolutely nonsensical, and here's why. With logic, reason, empathy, intellectual integrity, honesty, and facts taken together, those are superpowers. Because the people trying to make things worse, it's their kryptonite. That is their kryptonite. When we speak in truth, with clarity, with authenticity, with intellectual honesty, based on irrefutable facts, their arguments, their attacks, their power will crumble. I'm going to stop babbling. Real, raw, radically unscripted, and chaotically unpredictable. But it is what it is. As always, thank you for watching. I'm going to take a little break and figure out what I'm going to do for the rest of my day. It might be some more video game content, as I just took a long break to relieve the pressure of feeling burnt out. As much as I love Crimson Desert and all the games I've been playing before that, I got so hyper fixated over the last several months that the variety chaos part got completely thrown out the window, and I also just kind of got burnt out on it. But I'm back, and I need your help finding that audience that I've, as of yet, not quite found. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon.